Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another photo mishmash. This one being broadcast live February 12th, 2020. Happy February, everybody. We're going to be talking about our snowmobile adventure and the whole trip that Steve and I just led across Yellowstone, snowy Yellowstone. We got cameras to talk about, big new cameras, little new cameras, Firefall. That's that beautiful waterfall that gets lit up by the setting sun in too many parks that we've just stayed in. I was on a roll. I had like 3 whole sentences without stumbling. This is that show where we stumble through the week's photo news, and I'm so glad that I'm joined by my good friend, co-leader, and co-host on today's show, Steve. How you doing?
I'm great, Toby. Good to be back with you guys. This has got to be some sort of record in terms of broadcast, aside from the times that we do this live, but broadcasting just coming off of a tour. Because we just got home a couple hours ago.
That's right.
Hours ago.
I saw you snoozing sweetly next to me as we went to sleep. No, that's actually true. I fell asleep first. But anyway, yeah. We said goodbye to each other late last night. You left crack of dawn.
It was early. Yeah. It was, it was 3:30 when my alarm went off, and I was pretty much up and out the door in about 10 minutes. So hopefully I didn't wake you too much. And got to the airport. Everything was fine. It's good to be home. But I got to say, that tour is probably we say this a lot. We try to figure out our favorite like domestic tour, and we have a lot of really good ones. But there's just something about that area in the U.S. that draws me in every year. When it's snowy like that, and around Bozeman and Big Sky and West Yellowstone, it's just gorgeous.
It is a beautiful area. We were talking about one. I think we both have stayed in that hotel more than any other hotels out of the last 5 years, because we've done this trip so consistently. There's been a couple of times where we've done that trip back to back. So this is a Yellowstone winter workshop for those who weren't following along, who weren't on the trip. It is awesome. I love traveling in Yellowstone National Park in the wintertime. You can only go in with guided snowmobiles or on guided snow coaches. We spend 2 days in the park in the snow coaches, and the wildlife is still there. The scenery is epic. I think in a lot of cases, the scenery is better than it is in summertime.
Well, I think so. I was only there in the summer years ago. I think it was 2011. And it was gorgeous. It was amazing, but it was so crowded. And we talked about, doing that loop around. It's a 2-lane road. And I remember just spending hours on there. And, somebody would be at the leading the pack, and they see a squirrel and they all stop for like an hour.
Not just a squirrel, a Yellowstone squirrel.
Yeah, a Yellowstone squirrel.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exciting stuff.
Summertime is a whole different ball game. I like it. I prefer it much more than the summertime, but I'm one of these people that just doesn't like big crowds. And so for me, it's just a perfect trip. I absolutely love it. And we get to cap it off with snowmobile riding or digging out snowmobiles, depending on how the day goes. This year was a little rough.
Yep.
We had a good time and nobody got hurt.
Right. Nobody got hurt. And everybody did have a good time. And the irony of that was we had some of the best weather, some of the best temperatures, some of the best groomed trails that we've ever been on. But as a group, we managed to have a few stuck snowmobiles.
Yeah.
And it is, one, it's amazing how a sticky a spot you can get them out. But 2, they are heavy. And it does take some serious work.
Yeah. We should know better, really. We should have showed up with a tow rope and a shovel this year. They don't give you that stuff at the rental office. They just say, here's the 800 number on the side of the sled. If you have a problem now, go have fun with your damage waiver. But in next year, we got to bring a tow rope, because those things are heavy. I think all of us rented the 900s, which is actually a 2-seater 900cc engine. I mean, these are probably 700-pound machines. And there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just unbelievable what people are able to get those things into and what we're able to get them out of. You can see on that video right there, all the plastics on the front end, the fairing, the windshield, everything just popped off. She went down into this 9-foot gully and it was sideways down in that water. Unfortunately, nobody got a picture of that, but we had to put it right side up and drive it out. And then this same person who will remain nameless managed to get it stuck here right after lunch. So that's me kind of pushing and doing it out. And then this is a third machine. This one proved to be the hardest, and it just kind of went into this little tree gulch.
Yeah, it really wasn't. It didn't appear at first to be that stuck, but holy moly!
Yeah,
I might have let loose more than a couple of choice words as we were trying to dig that one out. Not directed at anybody, just the fact that it was so stuck.
Well, I don't know if you remember, I dropped a big F-bomb there. Steve in the blue jacket with the helmet on, nicest dude in the world. I mean, he was jumping up, giving us a hand. And we went to go pull the tracks out, and we counted to 3, and we pulled, and his hand slipped, and his helmet, I took my helmet off at that point, and his helmet just hit my head right up here.
Yeah,
and it was it just startled me more than anything. It rattled my teeth, and
I heard it go boom.
It was painful, and that was at the end of the day. I had just been kind of tired of digging sleds out and going slow, but I dropped a bomb, pretty loud one too.
But did you see that background? Those ghosted trees are just awesome. And we did as a group make it up there and make it all back safely with all of the sleds intact. I'm not even sure the 911 sled, which rider remained nameless, was even charged insurance. I'm not sure. Did you guys fix that up enough?
Oh, it was fine. It was perfectly fine. All the metal was straight. All the none of the plastic was broken. You know, they do a good job at designing these things so that they just pop off.
Yeah.
And we've had sleds where the plastics have really been damaged, but fortunately that just popped off and it popped right back on, and it was fine.
A little bit of water in the trunk.
Yeah. Where the camera bag was.
Yeah. But even the camera gear was okay. So with this like stellar glowing review of our snowmobiling activity, I will tell you that we're very close to announcing a return to Yellowstone next year. Snowmobiling is optional. We're going to have some other cool activities that day as well. So if you'd rather not, or you're a little nervous about getting out there, that's fine. But the 2 days in Yellowstone plus the day with Sweeney photographing on our way back in Virginia City, the portrait stuff. I think if you check my Instagram stories, you'll still see a quick little snap from my phone that shows you kind of what that looks like. It's a great trip, and it's going to sell out. So if you want to be on that pre-notice list, you should be a PEN member, and you can learn more about joining PEN at photorec.tv/PEN. Those folks usually get first notice. I say usually because sometimes we're on tour and David says, hey, I'm about to announce this tour, and it honestly will sell out from the people on a tour right now.
Yeah.
And then it goes to the Photo Enthusiast Network folks. And we haven't welcomed the chat room yet. Thank you so much for joining us live today. It makes the show so much better. Enjoy you all. Brian is in the chat. He was one of our sledders. He was not one of our crashers this year.
Not this year. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because, you know, I posted a lot about the snowmobiles, and obviously we're talking about them and stuff, but really, to get off of that for a second, the weather and the conditions that we had this year was just spectacular. It was never too cold. The skies would clear at certain photo spots. There was a couple spots where it was really snowy, but the second day was absolutely just gorgeous. And I can't wait to go through these pictures. I just started uploading them right before we started the broadcast, and I can't wait to look at those. They're so epic. And the really dark skies with those ghost trees up there that we rode up to with the snowmobiles. I mean, where do you see that in the world unless you live in those super high elevated areas? But it was neat.
It is very cool. It's a very cool trip. So stay tuned for more information about that. Follow Steve on Instagram and also on Facebook. His Facebook is linked right down below. I've just a little too lazy to make a banner, but Steve's Facebook is right down below. I'm excited to see your pictures, Steve. I'm excited to start working on my own as well. And kind of a gear or trip update report from this trip. One, I was testing out the still full of stuff, the Shimoda Explore 30 bag. And I have to say, I really, really like it. It's not going to replace my Mindshift 26L backlight for everything, but it's a little bit more of a hybrid bag. So when I don't need to carry as much photo gear and mix it up with a little bit of food, snacks, jacket, fleece and things like that, that's going to work really, really nicely. So that's cool. Also, I flew the Mavic Mini on top of the mountain. So that's at 8,200 feet, and it was well below freezing. It wasn't below zero when we were up there, but it was chilly. I'd peg it around 20 probably when we were at the top.
Our elevation, not the elevation of the Mavic.
Right. Yeah. And it flew great. It flew really, really well. So I just want to kind of update that Mavic Mini review that I did a couple of weeks ago and say that I'm still really happy and really impressed with that little drone. I can highly recommend it for just about everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I did put up that information about Pen, and I also just want to really remind you before we dive into all the show news and everything else that we cover in this show. This show is brought to you, and this channel is brought to you by Squarespace. You can save 10% off the purchase of your domain, website, gallery, storefront, portfolio by starting at squarespace.com/photorectv. That earns me a little money, and I thank them so much for their support of this show. Really, we talk about this all of the time. Instagram and Facebook are good places to put your work because there's a lot of eyeballs there, but they are not. When we are picky photographers and we take the time to edit carefully, they are not the best place to actually showcase our hard work because compression algorithms just really make it crap. You might be competing with an ad right above you. The person scrolling through is probably like annoyed by some ad they just saw, and then they see your picture and they don't get the full impact. So you should have a place. It doesn't have to be Squarespace. It should be some place where you control everything around your work. I think that's really important. If you don't have that, you should make that a goal in 2020. I do think Squarespace is a great place to do it, but find some place where you can put your work and showcase it in all of its big, unsquashed algorithmic beauty.
Well, the other thing that's really great about having your own website is we have more and more social media options. And some of them just kind of come and go, and some of them stick around. And I really like with my website is I can just direct people to stevescurich.com. And from there, they can find everything. They have links to Facebook and Instagram and your grandfather clock app, whatever that's called. Sorry, I couldn't resist. TikTok. I don't have a TikTok. Sorry. I probably never will, but Toby does. Anyway, you can link all that stuff just on your own website. So it gives you this professional presence, and then it's just easy. You don't have to send people links to where to find you and stuff like that. Just say, hey, go to my website, and it's all right there.
Yep. I think that is really important. Good point. Thank you, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
All right. A couple other quick things I want to talk about. I want to mention Brian in chat. We, as Photo Enthusiast Network members, every week you get an article written by one of us. This week it actually happens to be a guest contribution from Brian Scanlon about shooting his first wedding. One of our most popular, based simply on comments and likes in the Facebook community already. Give us a little teaser there, Steve.
Well, really well deserved too. Brian's a great writer. He's been doing this. He's been writing. I don't know how many years he said, but kind of in a professional sense for years, and he does business consultations and stuff like that. So it's really, really well written. There's a lot of humor in it. His personality comes through in it, and it's all about his experience shooting a wedding for the first time. And he's, an amateur photographer. He's got a day job, but huge enthusiast when it comes to photography, and really like a poster child of somebody who's taking advantage of pen, and really just, I've seen him just grow over the last couple of years, and he's turned out some amazing work, and he's just a great dude. So I highly encourage you to go check that out. I mean, just if you've been approached about shooting a wedding, maybe you have shot a wedding before, or you're just curious, like, what do people go through when they go to shoot a wedding for the first time? This is such a thorough, funny, fun piece to read. And if you haven't read it yet, just set some time aside and read it. it's popular for a very good reason. And one of the things that I said, I gave them a shout out on the Facebook group, is you guys hear from us instructors all the time, especially in Penn. You get Tuesday tips from David, Ali, Toby, or myself, video tutorials and stuff like that. It's really refreshing when we can have some of the members come in and write an article or highlight an experience that they had, and they get to hear about an experience that isn't just a professional photographer experience. It's somebody who's, you know, kind of stepping out from their day job and doing something different. And so I'm very appreciative to Brian for doing that. I know we all are at Penn, and just go check it out. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very well said. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think it can seem sometimes that we have moved beyond that kind of feeling of beginner and can lose that perspective. I think we still have a good chunk of it. And that's one of the things that I really like about Penn is we remember the struggle as you're beginning. But just to have somebody who can write it so eloquently is nice.
Yeah.
I want to go back real quick. Trelina made the kind of silly comment, I'm not in good enough shape to go on one of your trips. Oh, Trelina. Yes, you are. One of the things to remember, I know you're joking. I know you are. Don't say you're serious, because one, I've seen your dance videos. And two, it's up to you. If you want to step 5 feet out of these bus and that's where you're going to photograph from on these trips, that's totally fine. If you want to go snowmobiling and ride it up the big mountain, that's totally fine. But we had all ages out there on snowmobiles. And as I said, everybody made it back safely and everybody has fun.
Yeah, and we had a number of people that sat out too. So it kind of looks like that's just part of the trip and you have to do it. And there's no pressure to do that. It's just that a lot of people do opt to do that. I think in the future, we've talked about the possibility of having a couple different options or just free time. But not everybody went on the snowmobiles. And to Toby's point, I mean, we really spend time and cater to you and your needs. And anybody that's been on trips with us can hopefully attest to this, if, you know, assuming we did our job right. You know, if you just want to take it easy and you don't want to hike far or anything like that, it's perfectly fine. In fact, there's usually half the group feels the same way. So we will split people up if we need to, but there's hopefully nobody ever feels embarrassed or left out or anything like that. We try our best to make sure that that's just not the case. So I certainly wouldn't let something like that discourage you.
Yeah, that's good. Yep. And Pam says, if she can do it, anybody can do it. And I don't, you know, Pam, it's your story to share, but I'll just share the snippet that you told me the other day is your knees get really creaky and sore when you walk down the cold food aisle in the grocery store. So, and you came along on that last Yosemite and you were fine. So,
yeah. And Pam is such a sweetheart. She has such a great attitude and it's super inspiring. To see people that, you know, you can tell if somebody is kind of in pain, but they're having a good time and they're going through it and they can be very infectious in a very good way. Yeah. So thanks, ma'am.
Yeah. And, you know, I was describing on the shuttle bus to the airport this morning was a couple who lived in Montana and are going to Maui for some whale watching. And they were really excited and interested in hearing more about the photography tour we just led. And, oh my gosh, I completely forgot what I was going to say about them. I know. I said that they are a ton of fun because everybody that comes on the trips is on vacation. So they're all having a good time and we just take them to these beautiful places and help them get pictures. It's a pretty sweet gig. Yeah. I know. Most of you know that.
It is a sweet gig.
All right. Let's chat a little bit. Let's see. What do we need to chat about? I think we covered all that important stuff. I will mention that there is that Yellowstone trip. You'll get more information about that. You could join me if you're internationally adventurous in Patagonia and Chile. That will be about a year from now, a little less actually. I'll be leading a tour. It's the extension to Antarctica, but it is a robust enough tour where it's worth your while to come down just for that. All of the links and articles and bits that we're talking about, including links to join Penn, the links to save at Squarespace, they are all right down below. Follow the link that says show notes and you will find all of this information. Okay. We're going to jump into the part of our show that we really enjoy and think that you enjoy as well. This is the Lightroom tips and tricks part. So let me share screen again and open up Lightroom. And we've got 2 shots to talk about this week. And just a reminder, Penn members, you get to submit an image each week and we do a little critiquing And we do a lot of Lightroom tips and tricks. That's really the goal of this session, because as Pen members, you have a lot of other places that you can get that kind of feedback on. And if you love this section and you missed last week's video from me, it was just Lightroom tips and tricks on a couple of your submitted photos. So go take a look for that. It's in the Lightroom section of the editing section on Pen. Okay. First up, we've got Kevin Walk's waterfall here. Kevin, you had the name of it. I saw this on Facebook. I can't remember the name of this. It's down along the Big Sur, California coast.
Was it McWay or something like that?
That sounds right, Steve. Yeah. It's down along the Big Sur, California coast. Was it
McWay or something like that? There we go.
It's okay. It's all right. Okay. So first thing I did is I hit the R for the crop tool, because I love that it brings up our, what do you call this thing? The grid. And I think, Kevin, you've done a pretty nice, mindful job of the grid here. We've got this kind of waterfall coming in on the left third, out to this aquamarine water. Chat room, maybe you can argue about what color that really is. You describe it, but it's very pretty.
Emerald?
Emerald. I asked the chat room, Steve, not you.
I'm going with emerald. I gotta throw my 2 cents in there.
All right.
Just like that.
You only have 1 cent after you banged heads with the other Steve, so you better hold on to it.
I love lamp. All
right. This is pretty, and I think you've done nice post processing. There's nothing that jumps out at me that it really needs.
It does to me.
What's that?
And that's not knocking the photo at all. It's a beautiful picture. And I want to go to this location. This is absolutely amazing. The one suggestion that I'll make, because you're on the crop tool, so that hopefully this will be very easy, is there is a lot going on in this picture. And I get it. You're up at this great scene. It's just awesome. It's epic. But it's kind of, I find myself hunting around like, okay, what is the story here? Is it the waterfall falling on the sand? Is it the emerald water washing up on shore? Is it the rocks and the water as the combination? Is it the fact that this is a bay and there's another bay behind it? So what I would do initially with a shot like this is I would crop out that upper right bright water area, because I feel like it just constantly is taking me away from wanting to look at the waterfall and that whole scene right there where it's hitting the sand and then you go into the emerald green water. I just want to focus on that. And I feel like having that bright section up there pulls my eye away from there a lot. And I may even consider coming up a little bit from the bottom, because there's just a lot of that whitewash there. It's what's happening is the waterfall is getting lost in these other bright elements, these competing visual elements. Yeah.
I like this, but I'm feeling a little too tight on our waterfall.
I think you have to fill it in. I think you need to come down just a little bit, but then fill it in at the top. Yeah. That's what I would do anyway.
Yeah. Come on up here and then maybe try to fill in these spaces. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's really nice. I think your shutter speed, Kevin, 1/8 of a second. I'd love to see just a little bit more soft motion down here, but you could brush on a little bit of.
He put a post up of like a behind the scenes. So his camera taking this shot, and I don't know if it was on Facebook or Instagram or what, but attached to his tripod were the Nissi filters.
Yep.
And so, yeah, Kevin, you're at the scene, you have filters on there. You could definitely go with a longer exposure. Doesn't have to be super long. I actually love the timing of what you did with the water, the tide coming in and then going out. To Toby's point, I'd love to see it a little bit longer. And that would also soften up that thick whitewash that you get up there on the beach. It would just wouldn't be quite so bright.
Yeah, you could certainly come in there with a lowered texture, lowered clarity, maybe even dehaze. I don't know. Let's leave that alone. And brush on there to kind of soften some of that. But it's not going to be the same as a motion blur. You could try selecting this and doing a little bit of a motion blur in Photoshop as well. But yeah,
and
it's nice.
In the chat room, he does have a 10-stop filter, which would work fine. I mean, like it's kind of sometime in midday, you have plenty of light. It's just a really, really epic scene. And I think taking some time to really think about what story you want to tell and how you want to tell that story, and then just watch really bright elements, squint your eyes, and the things that jump out at you, I would consider, oh, there you go, man. Well,
yeah, you know what? Gareth asked in the chat, would the waterfall by itself be enough? And so I just, in the crop tool, hit X, will flip or rotate the aspect ratio you're working on, which flipped it over here. And, again, we always say this, but I feel like we need to always say this. We're not recommending you go take a wide shot and always crop to this, but when we're out there, think about how you could simplify and simplify and simplify. And I think there are some other compositions that are potentials in here as well.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to do this will probably be a Tuesday tip of mine at some point in the future. David did kind of send out, or he did send out that really cool email that highlighted past PPA winners and their images, just some stunning images. I'd love to go find some other contests and some other, images that are just at the very top and share them, because I think if the common thread through so many of them is going to be simplicity. They're just going to be simplified down to the simplest, strongest element. And it just kind of really smacks you in the face of the subject. And I think that can help. As we're out there in the field, we see this beautiful scene. We want to capture all of it. But then the viewer can sometimes get a little bit lost when there's just too much going on.
Now, what I will say is, if you wanted to, let's say, Kev, you wanted to go to print with this really large, it could be a really cool, obviously it would be a cool single print if you wanted to do that. But if you did this really kind of wide horizontal format, like we had it cropped before we went vertical here, I've seen it look pretty cool. You can do acrylics, and you can split that into 3 images, and you kind of mount them on a wall together. That way, it's almost like the viewer is able to focus in on 3 vertical images, but it makes one long horizontal. And it can take a scene that contains a lot of information and split it up, and it just looks really cool. It's a pretty costly thing to do, but that might be a way to go if you wanted to do a large format print for your wall with this.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. I hope to get to this spot maybe a little bit later this year. It's been on my list for a while. All right, let's move on to Jeremy's downtown Juneau. We've seen a similar picture from him, but we haven't seen this one.
I like this, man. I love the what's going on with the sky there. It's hard for me to tell on my screen if there's any noise. It's probably clean, but it's just, I'm looking at recording here.
Yeah, there is some noise. There definitely is some noise up in the sky. And I don't know. I'm a little drawn away from this epicness by what I think is a cloud, but it almost feels like, and sorry, Jeremy, this is a gorgeous image, but it almost feels like this is bad editing. I think it's actually a natural cloud, but it just has a look to me that throws me a little bit. So I might work on seeing if you can just get rid of that. But is that what you're saying you love, Steve?
Well, yeah, because I like it's almost like a graduated filter right there, right?
Yeah.
It's light and then it becomes dark. Unfortunately, the resolution that I'm looking at on my screen isn't very good.
Yeah.
I'm just not able to see what the detail is in there. It could be, an aurora up overhead that's casting a brighter light down. But I like how soft that is, and how it kind of just gradually comes down to the mountain in a darker shade, and then you've got all the more in focus elements with the lights and the mountain and stuff like that. So
so I did a graduated filter over that, reduced texture clarity, increased noise reduction, and also warmed it actually tinted it towards the red. So it just kind of gives it a little bit of an evening, because I feel like this is late evening shot, and just gives it a little bit more of that feeling. So then, of course, you can come in with a brush and make sure it's not hitting these mountains, because you don't want to de-texturize these mountains, because they're epic. And the way you see this town perched just below this amazing mountain is pretty cool. like
Yeah,
that.
and it says it's a pano, so this is stitched together, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I do like that little shoreline that he left in there on the lower left corner. Yeah, how it kind of comes around and then it points right towards on the same plane as the lights being reflected in the water there.
Mm-hmm.
The top of that shoreline, though, has some bright orange sort of bushes or something that I may consider getting out of there, because
Okay.
it just kind of, there's a little bit of it and it's a really wide shot. So there's only a little bit of it and then it ends off frame very quickly.
Yeah.
So, if there's a way that you could put that out, I'd hate to shorten that shoreline though, because I feel like it's kind of short as it is.
Yep. Yep, I agree. And then, I mean, we just have fantastic colors. This reminds me of, I don't know, a Gap ad or something. There's just some awesome colors streaking down here that I really like.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would do anything else there with it. It's nice.
Kevin says lasso and fill. Yeah. Take Photoshop, Kev. To your point, good suggestion. You take this into Photoshop, lasso those bushes right there, and you can either do content aware fill, or you can use like a clone stamp tool and just kind of create some more water behind there.
Yeah, and it looks like we have just a little bit of some editing goof right here. So just watch that and bring that in. And again, if you're going to take something like this to print, you just really want to take your time and look for any of those little things that might really show up once it's on a larger print sitting on your wall. I'd love to visit Juneau. It just looks so cool.
I know every time Jeremy's one of those guys, every time I see a shot, I can tell his work right away, because he shoots, from this Juneau area quite a bit. And every time I see one of his pictures, I absolutely just love looking at it. Looks like a great spot.
Yeah. Yep, very nice. We just had 2 today, so that's all. We're done with that. Thank you so much. There will be a show next week, so make sure you look out for that link. It is the same link, so you could bookmark it, and you could set a calendar reminder. You could say, okay, Google, remind me next week. All of those things are possibilities, so consider doing that so that you submit for next week. Okay. Let's jump to a little bit of news, and let's talk about Lightroom first, because it got an update today. And so let me share not my entire screen this time, but maybe a little bit smaller portion, like here. February photography releases. All right. So this is a nice little blog post talking about what they've updated, and they have really said that in Classic, performance, quality, and stability have been primary focus of their team since October of 2018. Now, one of the things we talk about alternatives to Lightroom. There are some good ones. David is starting a series on DxO, which really does have some nice features. It's cheaper. There's no subscription model to it. But for an all-in-one program, Lightroom still has my heart. I keep trying to dabble with others, but all together, I really do like Lightroom. It is slow at times, but I've said this in some of the sessions we've taught in person recently. The last couple of updates have seemed to take care of most of the sluggishness. And sure, I wouldn't consider all of the features of it fast, but I'm not getting that lag that I used to get. And this iMac's starting to get a little bit older, so it's been running pretty good for me. Steve, you're editing pretty big HASI files in there. How is it running for you these days?
Well, I can't really speak to different versions of Lightroom at this point, because I just started a new 2020 catalog, and it's on my hard drive with a backup, as opposed to working off of my external drive, which was getting really kind of clogged up. The drive I was working off of was really full. So I've started a new catalog this year, a new decade, good time to do it. And so it's performing super fast, because I have an iMac that's built with, tons of memory and a really fast computer. When I'm working off an external drive, it worked just fine because it's Thunderbolt 3. So the throughput is fast. But when that starts to get choked up, it's not so quick, which is what I was dealing with towards the end of last year. Now it's fast again. So I don't know if it's because newer versions of Lightroom. I think it's a combination of everything. Newer versions of Lightroom, and then, just working right off of my hard drive that has tons of open space on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's smart. And I think that some people overlook the fact that there may be other bottlenecks in their process.
Yeah.
So to keep an eye out for that. Yep. So there are no real big speed improvements in this one, except a little bit further down, some additional features now make use of your GPU. Whereas they did not before. So again, that's kind of offloading from the CPU, and we should see some performance improvements. But first, we've got improved raw default settings. This was a complicated thing before that I stumbled across actually not too long ago, and was like, oh, you can set different raw defaults for different cameras and for different ISOs. So let's say you bring in a Sony file at ISO 400, and you bring in a Sony file at ISO 1600, you can actually set up different noise reduction automatic defaults based on the ISO of the camera. They've now made that easier based on the camera models and easy to create defaults. It's here in the preference panel, so that's one thing. We now have support for PSB files, which are really large Photoshop files. I've made some pretty large Photoshop files, and I've never used PSB. Have you, Steve?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I think we had a couple of them come through either on this show or some of the pen files before.
Yeah, I think that might be right. As I said, more GPU accelerated editing, full GPU acceleration for lens correction and transform, eGPU empowered enhancements. So if you've got an eGPU plugged in, better secondary display, better auto sync improvements. This is where you edit one picture and then you tell it to automatically sync those edits to those other pictures. And there's a way, I often use sync. I don't often use auto sync, but it will, as you go back to that one picture, anything you change to it, you don't have to tell it to sync again. It will auto do it for you. And so now it's going to be telling you exactly what it's going to be doing. And you can now import your Photoshop Elements catalog into Lightroom Classic, which makes it easier to move between those two programs. And that's basically it, except for Kevin G. Guerrera. I think that's how you say your last name. I know you have tried to submit D&Gs before from Lightroom CC, the more mobile-friendly version, and now it's a thing. You can submit a D&G to us so that we'll be able to see your edits.
I'm still totally confused about why Adobe has done this with Classic and CC and mobile. They have 3 versions of Lightroom.
Well, no, Lightroom CC is the mobile. It's across all of those, right?
It just,
maybe I'm wrong.
It just feels half-baked. And
yeah,
they would have just figured out a way for it to work on multiple platforms and have syncing capabilities, as well as the robust editing developed module that you have with Classic.
Yeah, I said it before. I'll say it again. I said that before, and I'll say that again. Old code base. I think this older code that the Lightroom Classic is built on just can't run well on more mobile-friendly devices, and so they had to scratch that and say start over. And it is confusing. I hope down the road that this all comes together in some brilliant plan. I'm worried though.
And I get that, but why was it rolled out with so many features missing, so much functionality missing? It was just it was like Lightroom Lite when it was first introduced. And okay, now you can export a DNG. Yeah, that should have happened a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I know. Improvements to photo merge. You can now bypass the photo merge document when creating HDR for panorama. Oh, we're back. We're into the Lightroom section, not Lightroom Classic. So this is all just the stuff I don't use. And I really should work in it a little bit more often, because like Dolph came on this trip and he needed to move photos around, and it took me a little bit longer than I should have to find where his photos were. They actually were only in the cloud. Oh, and this is the thing. So that Lightroom CC, his photos, the group of photos he wanted to have on his hard drive, they were only in the cloud. How do you get them? You got to go install an Adobe program called Lightroom Downloader. So why isn't that built into Lightroom? If it puts them in the cloud, why can't it get them from the cloud?
Right.
But
man, this is Bush League.
But still, I'm overall pretty happy with Lightroom Classic, all things considered. All right, let's talk about, well, we mentioned this. I love my little title I got here. Firefall. How about fire tinkle? So
That just sounds painful.
fire tinkle. Yeah, that's when you have a UTI, right? Okay. No, it's not. It's not that. This is when Horsetail Falls in Yosemite National Park during a period of about mid-February to the end of February, if it's flowing nicely, gets gorgeously lit up by the setting sun and just is brilliant red, orange, golden sunset colors. The Firefall nickname came from when they used to build a big bonfire up there and then kick it over. And the park stopped that, I think, in the 60s because they're like, oh, this isn't such a good idea. Maybe we create a forest fire, stuff like that. So last year, it was a complete zoo. Brian, I think it was last year that you shot. I have 2 of your pictures up from it to kind of give you a sense of it.
Awesome.
Oh no, this is from 2016. I looked for it. I know you have even a better picture that I'm pretty sure was last year captured, but it is a really, really cool thing to see. I'm a little annoyed that I've never seen it in person, mostly because I get asked a lot, especially when we do the Yosemite workshop. Have you ever seen that? Have you been there in person? No, I haven't. I would like to, but it's not at the top of my list, but it certainly does look like a beautiful thing. They're saying this year that there's very little water flowing over the falls. So there's very little to get lit up by the sun. Even with that said, they have implemented some incredibly strict rules this year, which I'm fully on board with, because last year, apparently people trampled all over sensitive areas, left tons of trash behind. Look, man, this pisses me off. You're coming to a place to photograph a gorgeous thing and you're going to make all of the other stuff around it just look like a trash heap. Our national park, a trash heap? That's stupid. Stop doing that. So you're going to have to park far away. You're going to have to walk in. There's going to be a very designated and pretty limited area that you can be in, and all the rest of it's going to be roped off. And I imagine that there'll be a good ranger presence there to keep people from jumping around. So, and Brian says much smaller crowds with a 1 mile hike in now due to the restrictions. Good. I mean, it should be I think people that take the effort.
Yep.
And so we'll see. There's always next year for that. All right.
Tinkle.
Yeah. Next year. Okay. Steve, you and I were talking about this the other day. The Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra has a 108 megapixel camera. How many megapixels does your $10,000 Hasselblad
have? 50.
God, you should just throw it out the window. Get yourself an Ultra. Not only does it have that, I haven't read this article. I don't know why the Verge claims it's not a gimmick, but I mean, this phone has a lot packed into it, including was it a 3-time or a 5-time optical zoom? I think it's a 3x optical zoom, but they say up to 10x lossless optical combined with digital zoom. And that's, I think, similar to what the Pixel phones do. You can zoom in. For a long time, we always said, don't digitally zoom on your phone, because a digital zoom is never as good as taking a shot and then cropping in a little bit later in Photoshop. But now these phones have smarts built into them that when you zoom in, it does things that are better than if you just zoomed in after the fact. Or cropped in. So it combines this. So you have up to a 10-time lossless zoom. That's impressive. And it'll go up to 100 times. But then that is where you really start to get in that digital zoom. And I imagine it's going to look pretty crummy. You also have a really wide angle 48 megapixel camera. You've got a more normal 64 megapixel sensor. And then, of course, that 108. And that's a 1 and 1.3 inch sensor. So it's bigger than the one in Nokia's iconic Lumia 1020. And it's an f1.8 aperture.
That's good. I mean, because that was going to be my question is, okay, so you have 100 megapixels on a phone camera on the sensor. 100 megapixels crammed onto this teeny tiny little sensor. How do you handle light with that? Obviously an aperture at 1.8, that's a big help.
Yeah.
But those are just tiny pixels. So I just wonder, in low light, of course you have a flash right there built into the phone, but low light, what does that look like? You know, that's the problem with the cell phone camera is when you want to blow something up and print it for your home or something like that, it starts to break down at a certain point pretty fast.
Yeah.
But for sharing on social media and stuff like that, they're awesome. They're absolutely awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. They really are. And this we don't have enough Galaxy S20 Ultra pictures yet to compare. So they're using the Xiaomi Note 10, which does some of that same kind of pixel binning techniques to show what the zoom looks like compared to an iPhone 11. And yeah, it's better. Definitely more detail in this building front here than over here on the iPhone 11, but not a dramatic difference. And I just will want to point out that you really pay for this Galaxy Samsung S20 Ultra. It's $1,400 at its base price with 112 megabytes of RAM and 120 or 12 gigabytes of RAM, sorry, and 128 gigabytes of storage. That you could.
I also watched a video on the S20, not the Ultra, the two versions that are less expensive.
Yeah.
They're still spendy, but instead of the 100 megapixel, I think they're somewhere around 50 or something like that. It's still a totally impressive camera setup on the lesser models too. So if you're a Samsung person, and the other thing that's really cool about that phone is Samsung has kind of stopped doing that screen that wraps around the edges. You know, they've changed the whole form of it. So it's just flat. It's just flat screen. They put a little dot at the top instead of a notch.
Yeah.
And I think they did a really nice job with that phone, and they've made it a bit thicker. So, you know, because the quality of the screen, I mean, what is it? And I think it shoots 8K, doesn't it?
It does. It shoots 8K at 24 frames a second, which is kind of insane as well.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to look decent.
So you're going to beat all the battery you can get with that thing.
Yeah, that's another thing. And that's also it's a 5G phone as well. I have to imagine battery life is going to be a little on the rough side if you're using the 5G radio. That is some battery eating stuff right there.
Yeah.
But still pretty cool. I'm interested to see how it performs. I hope to get my hands on one at some point here. But at $1,400, you were up there with the highest in point and shoot, the Sony RX 100 Mark. What are we up to 7 with a 24 to 200 millimeter lens, and that's a much bigger sensor. That's a 1-inch sensor. So you know, but again, you're always going to have that phone in your pocket. So if that is important to you, you might want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's somebody at my doorbell. Nobody's in the house that I know of.
You need to answer?
I'm gonna just let it go for right now.
Okay. If you need to answer, I could start talking about this OMD EM1 Mark.
Let me start on that. Let me check. Just
3.
How many backup here at home?
Yeah. So it was about 2 years ago when I released a video that said, this might be the camera that gets me to ditch Sony. That was the OMD EM1 Mark II. And I took it to Alaska when we did the longer Alaska workshop. And there was a lot to love about that camera. It's a micro four thirds camera. It is their, I was going to call it their flagship, but they have the EM1DX. This borrows a lot from that flagship and comes in at a much more reasonable price. DP Review's got a nice write-up. Again, this is linked right down below. New features, it gains a live neutral density filter system. So what it does basically is combine multiple shots in camera to give you a blur effect or a softening, like say Kevin Walk's picture we looked at a few moments ago. If you didn't have filters, but you wanted to get some movement in the water and you wanted to get that fall, those falls nice and silky smooth, you can do that in camera. And not only can you do that in camera, but it gives you feedback as you do that. It shows you what you're capturing. So you can say, oh, that's the perfect amount, stop. So we're talking about in this new EM1 Mark III, the micro four thirds camera with new features. It also has handheld high res mode. So I think it's a 20 megapixel sensor, but handheld, you can shoot the more complicated several images together that stitch together to make a 50 megapixel. And you can do that handheld because of its incredible stabilization. And the new processor brings improved face and eye autofocus. And Olympus was one of the first that brought that to the table and really did a good job with it. And Starry Sky AF mode. This is this really cool feature. It sounds cool on paper. I don't know how well it's going to work in practice. None of the review videos I've seen have really put it through its paces yet. I'm excited to get hands on this camera because of all these fun little features. But you can hold it and tell it to focus on the stars. It does some sensor boost stuff. It looks at the sky. It decides what's noise. It decides what's stars. And then it automatically sets its focus for star shots. And because they have that ridiculous sensor stabilization, you can actually hand hold for some star shots. That's kind of cool. A little bit higher LCD, faster refresh, but when you compare it to the others, cameras in its range, not so great. 7 stops of image stabilization. This is where Olympus is saying easily 4 seconds of handheld shooting. That's pretty crazy.
That's crazy.
I know. And I imagine some people will be able to get it even longer because it's the EM1 Mark II. I handheld for a couple of seconds and got good results. And some other people were saying they were getting up close to 10 seconds hand holding. And this one is improved now by several stops.
And that is using the camera body with an Olympus lens that has image stabilization, so they work together, right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And then IPX1 sealing, which again, the EM1 Mark II, faux blogger Chris Gambit, he ran under a faucet and it was totally fine. I don't recommend that, but this one is even upgraded from that. So really pretty nice. And then DP Reeves got this nice chart that kind of outlines the differences between all of these cameras. In many ways, the Olympus really is on top of some of these bigger sensor cameras. But what I think is interesting to point out is it weighs 580 grams. Careful, Steve. Spreadsheet trigger warning.
Here we go.
It weighs 580 grams. Look at the Fuji X-T3, 539 grams. And that's the bigger sensor. APS-C versus the Micro Four Thirds. But what I also really like, DP Review, thank you for doing this. This is great. Saves me the trouble of weighing this stuff out. Is they give you, what does that look like once you start to put lenses on it and get this kind of zoom? 1,600 grams versus 1,400 grams with kind of the equivalent zoom over on the thing side. So, it looks good. A lot of cool features. We see Olympus on our workshops, but not a ton of them.
Not nearly as much as I wish we'd see them. I think some of their offerings are just awesome. I like Olympus. I've been an Olympus fan. Well, geez, you go back to the film days. But the biggest problem I have with Olympus is the size of the sensor.
Yeah. You're a sensor size snob.
I wasn't until I went back and bought a crop sensor again recently, and it's awesome. But yeah, you do get a little spoiled with these larger sensors.
Yeah. Well, again, you're looking at a lot of medium format this day and full frame. I don't know. I look at my catalog of images that I love over the last year or so, and I really struggle to see images that couldn't have been made with a slightly smaller sensor. Yeah. Maybe they would have been a little bit noisier. I don't know. They feel like a good value, and especially if the weight and size is important to you, this is pretty nice.
Well, and you said it right there. They are a good value, a really good value. I cannot compare, an $850 crop sensor camera to a $10,000 mirrorless medium format. It's just, you talk about apples and oranges. So yeah, it's and really all the pixel peeping. I hate that term for some reason, but I found myself doing a lot more of that as an instructor now, because we want to zoom in and make sure that clients are really getting as sharp a shots as possible. Yeah. So I find myself doing that to my own photographs a lot and getting really particular. And to a certain degree, you need to do that, and that really pushes you to get better. But also, it can kind of bring you down and that shouldn't be the intent at all, because there's just amazing crop sensor cameras out there. And like I said earlier, I'm a big fan of what Olympus is doing, and these stabilized images that they're doing now with the IBIS and the stabilized lenses is just insane. Somebody had a hilarious comment in the chat room. Where'd it go? John Mayfield, I won't be happy until I can use bulb mode handheld and it turns out perfect. that's where we're going.
Yeah.
Look, it's going.
Yeah, they really are. Heather asked, it does have a flippy outy screen. The other thing I didn't mention is it nicely charges over USB and supports fast charging, fully charged in under 2 hours or about 2 hours. $17.99 body only. You know what's interesting is I was on B&H earlier. B&H has it listed for $23.99, I think, without any lenses. Something's wrong there, but it should be $17.99. I don't want to be greedy, but because of the slightly smaller sensor size, I would like to see this at $16.99 or maybe even $15.99. But Olympus has to try to make some money.
What's the XT3? And we have the XT4 coming in, I don't know, a week or so.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. The XT3 on B&H is $12.99.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, you know, it's but I think as a more capable hybrid camera, the Olympus with that stabilization and the video features offering you rock solid stabilization. Ditch your gimbals, ditch your tripods, handheld the video shots. They're going to look great. Will be an option as well. So, and I love the Micro Four Thirds open format lens system. I mean, tons of lens options, tons and tons and tons of them. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right. We do need to wrap this show up soon. So I just want to say that Nikon has more officially announced the D6, which looks to be a pretty serious powerhouse. I don't know what else to say about it than that. $6,500. It really is going to nicely incorporate some of the mirrorless features that we've seen them incorporate in like the D780 and, of course, the mirrorless cameras. And also, we're going to have 2 new Z lenses for their system, a 24-200, nice walk around, and a 21-8. We'll talk more about this soon, but yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
In time for the Summer Olympics, which are going to make people happy.
Yeah, I hope that I'd love to see Nikon share, start to trend back up. Love to see them, perform well, because they turn out great products.
They do. I think they're new mirrorless cameras. So follow me on Instagram. Follow my stories, because after I get off the show, I'm going to pick up a package from my shipping center. It's the Canon 90D, the Canon M6 Mark II, the mirrorless, the Nikon Z50, the mirrorless APS-C camera that they're making, the Sony A6600, a couple other little bits and bots. And over the next couple of weeks, I will be talking about all of that gear and trying to find you the best APS-C camera. Obviously, the Fuji X-T3 is not in there. That could be a viable alternative as well. And we're going to have to start, as you said, talking about the X-T4 very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, we got one question that I want to hit, and that is Kate asks, can you change the default color space in Lightroom so that when you open Lightroom, it opens in the color space of your choice? I watched Steve's quick tutorial. That was on Pen. Thank you for doing that, Steve. I couldn't see how you changed it. Thanks.
Yes, you can. So go ahead and open Lightroom. Toby, I don't know if you can share your screen.
Yep, I'll do that again. I have to. It's okay. I won't whine about it.
So Lightroom tends to ship or download with, I think it's Pro Photo as the default. And that's the reason I wanted to make that video. I could be wrong. It's been so long. And, since I've downloaded it, but yeah, is that I'm just having a hard time.
Yeah, sorry. So this is when you pass it to Adobe Photoshop.
Oh, okay. So no, you can go to preferences. Go like preferences.
Uh-huh.
Is that where you are?
Yep, that's where I am.
Okay. I can barely see that, so I'll probably just need to kind of do it on my screen.
Yeah, and then just tell me. I don't. I think, and this is, we can get into this discussion. The reason this is coming up is we've had a couple of members submit images, and once they're on the forum, they color shift because I think they're working in ProPhoto or another color profile, and then Adobe sRGB is what most of our browsers support. No, just sRGB, right? Where is this? Is it? It's not in catalog setting, is it? No.
I think I was getting it mixed up with the external editing and file handling.
Yeah. Let's Google.
My apologies.
I know when you export color profile, Lightroom, classic. If you go to the calibration panel and look at the profile menu, you'll find a list of your available color profile options. The options you see depend on the camera you use. No, that's not really what we want.
Let's see here.
Let's take that off. Danilo, go to photorec.tv/pen. We would love to have you join, and we have tons of content on there for business photography as well. See, when I say, let's say I want to export Jeremy's image, I go to export, and right here in file settings, I choose color space sRGB. That way I know the other choices is Adobe or ProPhoto. I haven't done a ton of research. I get asked this question from time to time, and I just come back to sRGB is the easiest to work in. And yes, maybe it doesn't support quite as many colors, but not a difference to ever matter. And I print big, beautiful prints, and I'm quite happy with them. So I know when you export.
I guess that's it. It's probably because you're working on the raw file.
Yeah.
So color space is irrelevant. It really only applies when you export it, whether you're bringing that into an external editor or you're exporting it to share out. Because otherwise you're working as a DNG or as a raw file. So it's got everything in there. So that must be what I was thinking about as a separate place versus the external editor, is just when on export, you choose what color space you want that to be.
Yeah.
But so my apologies. I was getting it mixed up with the external editing, which I do for
pretty much all of your images, right?
Share or finished off in Photoshop.
Yeah. Yeah. And so apparently it says Lightroom renders previews using ProPhoto RGB color space. And then in library, map, book, and print modules, it renders colors in Adobe RGB color space. And then, of course, I'm saying export as sRGB.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. And it's one of those things, I wouldn't get stressed about it. Again, I export all of my pictures as sRGB, the ones I'm going to print, the ones that I'm going to put on Instagram, and they all look beautiful to me.
Yeah, the breakdown occurs when you've got a photo that's a certain color space and you're trying to export it as a different color space. And unless you click the box that says convert to sRGB, so the color spaces match up, that's where you start to get this breakdown.
Okay.
And that's hopefully what the video kind of got across. But yeah, it's not going to look any different on your screen. It's just how is it going to look when it goes to export and ultimately like to print and to a viewer on a computer screen.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kate's saying, so in the raw file in Lightroom, you have to use ProPhoto. Yes. It seems like in the develop panel by default, you're in the ProPhoto mode. I'll do a little bit more research, make sure we are correct.
Yeah.
But I feel confident that yes, we are correct.
Yeah. I'd like to look into this a little bit more too. That's a good question. So,
can I set a color space as the default one for all Lightroom modules? No, such a setting is not available at the moment. So, yeah. Okay. There, we figured it out. All right. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for that question. Yeah. And thank you all so much, chat room, for hanging out with us on this Wednesday afternoon. Steve, thank you, even though you've been up since 3:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Well, you weren't exactly waking up much later than me. But
yeah, I actually woke up when you left, and I just stayed awake and looked at some TikToks and then did a little work.
Well,
and then got up.
Hours looking at TikTok.
Yeah, yeah. And then, but I had a fantastic flight home, super easy, nice front window seat. The window wasn't as clean as I would have liked, but I had some beautiful mountain views. Go take a look at my Instagram stories if you want to see some beautiful mountain views. And
I got upgraded to first class on the last leg, and I managed to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again.
Nice.
Such a good movie.
Give me the cliff notes. I hear it's too gory at the end for me.
You can handle it. I mean, it's rough, but it's a happy. It's not happy. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, so just go watch it.
Okay. And on that note, just go watch our show again. If you watched to the end and you hadn't hit that thumbs up button, please take a moment to do that. And just a reminder that you can follow Steve on his Facebook page and his Instagram. Those are both linked right down below on the show notes of more information. So you can find all of the articles that we talked about there. And if you haven't joined Pen yet, consider joining. So much great content there. New content added every week. And if you're starting a website and you want to use Squarespace, remember, please use my link, squarespace.com/photorectv. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We will see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Steve.